Hi everyone, welcome. I'm just putting together this brief video based on some information from the slides provided earlier. Show you here. So in one of our slides, we talked a bit about PostgreSQL, and then one of them also talked about the in-class activities and examples that are a part of this too. So for instance, using a Postgre package and then using source code as well. And then this idea of getting used to it. If you're familiar with these already, you don't really need to watch this video, but I wanted to put this together for students that might not be familiar with this. So what you're going to want to do here is to just go to two of the links that are posted in the PowerPoint. These will be posted inside of the URL of this video too. But I'm just going to kind of walk you through on a Windows machine how to do this. If you're using Mac, you can use the Mac OS. And if you need help doing this on Mac as well, I have a Mac I could try to use during office hours with you or make a separate video if it's needed. So what we're going to do first here, we have our admin is here. So we're going to go ahead and just find our type of machine that we're doing this on. So I have Windows, so I'm going to try to get PGAdmin 4 on Windows. Make sure you get the latest release per usual. So admin 4 will be here. And let's just try to go ahead and pick up this exe. Some of these sites are a bit old school with how they put this together. So just do your best with that one. So I'm going to save my exe here. Close these. And then I'm going to go ahead and open this guy up. And then if you're using a machine with multiple users, you can install for me only. I usually do it like this way, but it's up to you if you want to install for everyone. And now this process is pretty similar to what you might have seen already. This is my folder for app data and everything. If you want to have a specific folder here, you could change it. Just make sure that your sizes are, you're aware of that. So if you need to free up some space or use a different drive, go ahead and do that. And then just go ahead and click install on all of these. So I'll let this run. And while this guy's running, I'm going to go into my other URL that I had, which was the non-admin one. So this guy here, the PostgreSQL, which should have been the client side. Let me just double check in case I confused myself. So there should be two different links here. Yeah, so this is the that was the client one we just had, and this one's the server. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the server version of it. I'm going to download this installer. Again, just go ahead and pick which one is supported on it for you. Let me see the latest versions here. I'm going to hit this guy. Great, and this should also get an exe. I'm just going to save it to my desktop for simplicity's sake. And he should be downloading pretty soon. Awesome. So our admin is set up, so we can go ahead and hit finish. And now I have my other URL downloaded, which is the client one. So similar process. What I would say is that whatever default it has for your installation folders, I would keep it because these are going to communicate with each other at some points. What I would say here too, you can look at these different items here as well. We have the SQL server that we need. These two you might be able to uncheck if you don't want them, but I will go ahead and just for the time being, make sure that your command line is saved as well. So I think this would be safe, have them all, but if you know a bit more about this as well, you can go ahead and change it, keep it in the same data directory. And now this is going to be a password for your database super user. Let me see if it, yep, so it keeps it centered here. So I'm just going to make one up that I use pretty commonly. So just make sure whichever one you use, you go ahead and keep it handy. There will be ways to get it back, but just remember this is for a super user, so kind of like the all-time user. So just keep that handy for it. 4522 is fine as well. You could do 4002. I'm just going to make a note of this as well on my side. But again, whatever one it defaults you to, you can go ahead and just keep it there. We have different locales as well for database clusters. So you can go ahead and pick one, especially if you're doing this class remotely too. But I'm just going to stick it with the default locale and go ahead and install it. All right. So after this guy is installed too, you can launch your stack builder. There's a few of these that you can look at as well. But this is just for additional software if you wanted to try and use them too. We don't need to do that. We can see here that we could try to run on port 5432, that port that was from earlier. I can go ahead and try to look at these applications on that too. So as we get more advanced with these areas, we could try to get into some of these too. But for the time being, just install those two exes, you'll be good to go. One more thing is that we use the packages provided for us. If you're more familiar with it, that source code link that's at the bottom is provided here, so you can actually manually grab these up yourself using tar. You'll need 7-zip and some more unzipping programs, but you necessarily don't need to do this if you use the exes. Okay, everyone. So after you went ahead and installed the two exes, or you use the CLI tools to install it as well, I just wanted to show you how we can actually run a server and make sure that it's working. In the PowerPoint, one of the pieces of information was to run, a PCLI to check if the server's up and running. But what we could do here is also do two ways to approach this as well. So the first way is going to be using a front-end application called pgadmin. This should be installed when you install two of the exes. You can see this is where it's located inside of my Windows machine, but it might be different based on where you installed it. I'm going to go ahead and open this up. Now, the alternative to do this is using command line or terminal inside of Mac, and sometimes these front-end applications could be a bit overwhelming. So just make sure that you can play around with this and just make sure you're not too intimidated by everything here. But if you use this front end, there's a lot of information, especially with the documentation. I would recommend going here, as it will just give you all this information that might be sometimes too difficult to put into a full video for us to look at. So what we're going to do here is just hit add new server. You could also go up here and right click and create, so whichever one your preferred version is. So I'm going to put in a name. I'll just say something like practice server 1. This would be good. And now you'll see here there's a little error, either host name or service name must be specified. So there's a bunch of things you can mess around with here too. And once we get more advanced, we'll look into those as well. But what we're going to do is go to connection. Some of us might be familiar with this idea of local host, but whenever you're kind of running something locally on your client machine, and you might need to do this for that project where you make this application, we tend to use the term localhost. 5432 is that port it gave me at the start. You could see it's already filled in here. And I'm just going to make a basic password. For these, when you make a new server, you could change around the password, but you could just make it whatever you like. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And now we have a bunch of information here. We can see that he actually has a backend start time, and we have a bunch of activity. Once we get through all of these inside of the visual, we'll get deeper into these. But in general, we want to just see how this looks too. You can go ahead and go through a lot of this information. Again, a benefit of this front-end application is that you can see a lot of the things that are going on. So you have your schemas, subscriptions, languages, and a bunch of information that we'll get into later. You can go into your catalogs as well. What we're going to want to do to just make sure everything's up and running is once we hit on our practice server, we can go up to tools up here. And what we want to try to do is get our query tool to work. So we actually might need to go a bit further in. Okay. So inside of our Postgre server, and one more thing you'll see here, I'll just show that again. This application is useful because, as you can see here, I can't use my query tool on the entire database. I could only use it on like the sub server that is the Postgre server. Okay. So I'll go to tools, I hit query tool. And now you can see up here at the very top tab, what it's saying is that I'm using a query tool on this practice server. I'm going to use some SQL code here that we'll learn later on. Some of us might be familiar. We could type in select. I can make it lowercase. Purple is usually meaning that it's the a built-in piece of code. I'm going to go ahead and put these two parentheses here. And then I'm going to put a semicolon at the end. Whoops, sorry about that. And then I'm going to go ahead and simply press run. We'll see here, it said successfully run a query, and I'm using PostgreSQL 16.2 compiled by that. Cool. So if this is running for you, great. You made a server and you went ahead and ran SQL code on it, and that's kind of the start of where we want to be. I'm going to redo this one more time using a different version you might be interested in. The alternative way that we can get this to run is by opening up this thing called PSQL. This should also be installed with your server. Or sorry, once you enter in this information. And you can see that this is a bit more less bells and whistles our other version. So it's going to ask us for a server. Whatever's in the parentheses or brackets here is going to be the default. So if I just hit enter, it will be localhost. If I hit Postgre, that's going to be my database. So I'll click enter. My port's the same. You can see here I could actually change these if I want to, but I'm just going to leave this as default. Username is going to be the same, and let's just put in another password for us to use with. Cool. So now we can see here, I usually get a warning, but don't worry about that. If you get something different, let me know. But you can see here I'm running PSQL in 16.2, which is the same version as I have down here. And if I go ahead and I type in my select version clause again, we'll see here that we get Postgre 16.2 compiled, and we should be good to go. Great. So I was double checking a few other websites for the Mac versions of these. So some of these are such as like brew services stop and start. Some of these will be using on Mac. Linux is another one that you can use. For these videos, when I'm using on my machines, I'm going to be using Windows, but just let me know if you're struggling a bit with alternative tools, and I can jump into it as well. So again, I would say play around with some of these, get a bit familiar with how these works. Remember, nothing too major with all of these servers, so you can go ahead and create and delete them as you'd like, and just get a bit familiar with these tools and which ones you prefer.